Darren Middleton, welcome back to Australian Musician.
Oh, well, glad to be back.
You've got an 8-track mini album coming out on January 15. It's called Home. How far back do these songs go? Was it a lockdown project?
It started in lockdown, I would say. Probably just at the start of lockdown is when I started writing the first song or two for it, all the way up to sort of, 3 weeks ago from today, really, or 4 weeks ago from today. So, and it was definitely a different project for me and a different way of doing it because, just because of the situation that we were all in. There's a big difference when you do something with someone over Zoom and you can see them and you can talk to them, and that's great, but it's a whole different energy to having someone in the room, as you well know, Greg, where you can bounce ideas off them and you can react to the moment. And so it was a different way of doing it. People would send their parts in from their lounge rooms or from their homes, essentially. So yeah, but I kind of knocked it all together in the end. And look, it is what it is. I think there's a few good tracks in there, hopefully. I mean, you never know. Like any artist at the end of any project, you're pretty sick of it by the time you're at the start of it. You're at the end, but it's at the start for everyone else. So it's
I guess it's difficult to know what to call a release these days: an EP, an album, a mini album. And how many songs were you playing around with? Did you consider maybe adding a few more and calling it an album? Why did you decide to go?
It's not too late. The thing with in this day and age, the way we can record, it's not too late for me to add a couple of songs, is it, before January the 15th and just bump it up to full album status. But it's kind of, I just kind of feel like the way this was done is done. So I just want to kind of leave it as it is, as a bookmark in time, and with its strengths and weaknesses and whatever exists in a very human state, I suppose. So I don't know. Is it an EP? It's a mini album. I think I just looked up mini album and it lives somewhere between the 5 and 6 and the 10 and 11 song bracket.
Yeah.
So I figure I cover all my bases.
Yeah. So in general, what was the starting point for most of these songs?
You mean like, say, instrument-wise or motivation?
Yeah, construction-wise.
Yeah, construction, either the guitar or the piano. But for this batch of songs, I would say all guitar. Yeah, definitely all guitar, all acoustic, except for Precious Things and another song called Tomorrow Doesn't Know. They're definitely sort of specifically written on electric for electric with a certain vibe in mind. But because they were definitely mostly acoustic, because I kind of realized I couldn't really have a band. I couldn't really go to a studio. I couldn't really do it that way. So I kind of figured that I'd just write songs on acoustic. And I think my mindset, though, was definitely to write more positively as well. Like the songs, I think, have more of a definitive positive vibe to them, as opposed to the usual, or at least my usual, melancholy and oh, woe is, oh, my head and my heart are all mixed up and blah blah. So it's definitely a step in a positive direction.
Yeah. Precious Things is the first single. What's it about and how did that song come about?
That song came about firstly with me wanting to, I suppose the sonic jacket it wears definitely be a look back into just kind of what I used to love, more kind of 70s and Zeppelin-y sort of. I wanted it to be definitely have an electric energy to it, as opposed, and I wrote that song only like a month and a half ago, so that was a very late addition to the record. Lyrically, it's quite introspective in that it just kind of asks the question of yourself, like, did you give it all to something? You wanted everything, but did you give enough of yourself to really warrant that in return, I suppose? So it could be the idea of looking at a relationship when the smoke clears, going, oh, why didn't that work out? Maybe I didn't quite put enough of myself in there in the first place to to have it work out. So it sort of revolves around that question, I guess. You wanted it all. Well, did you give enough to sort of warrant getting it, I guess?
Yeah. Did you do the string arrangements for that?
Yeah, I played. I think I played every instrument on that, which is again, not how I like to do things, but I just found myself in that situation. I did have some help vocally wise with the choir singing at the end, and so there's a friend of mine, Emma Dean in Brisbane. She runs like a public choir group called Cheap Trill, and they've done some stuff with me before, so I got them involved. And I had some friends in Melbourne, Lawrence Henry sing. Yeah, but aside from that, the instruments, I think I played all of them. I kind of programmed the drums, but I did that loosely. Obviously, I played guitar, sang, played the bass and the string part, and yeah. Yeah. A real Lenny Kravitz I am, aren't I?
Yeah. Speaking of female voices, Stars Where You Dwell, a beautiful acoustic track. Who's the female voice on that track?
That's a local singer by the name of Ash Mannix, who's a part of a group called Little Georgia, and I met her a few months ago now at like a Writers in the Round event that was organised up here in northern New South Wales. And she was one of the singer-songwriters, myself and another person, Hannah Campbell. So, and Ash she kind of blew me away on the night. But I got back, I should probably take a step back here, Greg, because a lot of these songs were written with Susie DeMarchi singing a lot of these parts. Her and I were Zooming to each other. I got in contact with her at the start of the project saying, hey, look, we're both locked down, but do you want to see what we can do together? And then she was into it, and then she got really busy with once everything opened up, and she was busy with baby animals, so it didn't quite kind of pan out. So she exists on the record in lots of forms. You might be able to hear bits and pieces. But for this song, I was singing it, and I kind of went, it's all right. So I asked Ash if she'd be interested, and she came round, and I think I'm going to put out like an a cappella version of that, because I don't know, she's really good. And she's perfect in her imperfect way, and she just does it, and it's always really good. When those people who do things and every take is like, well, that's really good too. I don't know how to choose from this, so let's just use it all. So she came on board, and it's really nice. There's a little friendship that's formed there, and we might do something together in the future. And yeah.
So who else do you have appearing on the album?
Well, just not to drop names, but Suzi Quatro makes a little guest appearance on bass guitar on the song called Stars Where You Dwell. So I got onto Suzi Q through Susie DeMarchi when we were chatting, and Susie DeMarchi was saying, look, well, Suzi Quatro is a friend of mine. We could ask if she'd be interested. And so Susie put me onto Susie. Believe me, there's another story in this bit that almost got myself in a lot of trouble, because Susie Q. So I was emailing Susie Q, and instead of putting and Susie DeMarchi at the same time, but instead of putting SUZI, I called Susie Q SUZE. Hi, Suze. She just wrote back straight away going, sorry, Darren, but I'm Susie with an I, and she just wrote this really kind of abrupt, and I was going, oh my God, what have I done? And she wrote back going, it's cool, I'm kind of stirring you, thankfully. But I sent her about 4 songs, and she picked that one and said, look, here's some bass guitar for it. So it's very cool. And it's a really interesting bass guitar part. Nothing that I would have written, absolutely nothing that I would have come up with. It's really playful, and yeah, it's a really nice little kind of footnote to have for the process.
The track For You, another beautiful acoustic song, follows Precious Things. Precious Things has a big production. For You is just a more stripped back kind of song. Was it track order? Is that a consideration for you? Is that important?
It is, because I still have, the mindset of songs or albums being a journey of sort, just from the school of music that you and I kind of grew up with, really. These days, I don't know how important it is for most people, but it is still important for some people because people will buy the whole thing and press play from track one. So I feel like there does need to be a bit of a flow. I'm not sure whether there is a real definitive cohesive flow with this record just because of the way it was sort of pieced together. But look, I made an order that sort of felt good at the time, so hopefully it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the acoustic guitar you used on the recording, and how do you record your acoustic guitars? How do you like to mic them up?
Yeah, well, so the acoustic will be the J45 back there. It's the Gibson J45. I will definitely fairly standard miking. I mean, I'll probably mic it around the 12th fret, about, I guess, about seven inches away from around the 12th fret. Occasionally I will do that, and then I'll have a stereo pair of mics just a bit further back in the room to capture a little bit of the room sound. I guess it depends on the purpose of the six string. If the acoustic guitar is to really just be singly tracked and I suppose live in the center, then I'll probably add stereo mics just to give it center, but also to give it that kind of depth. If I'm planning on double tracking an acoustic or having two, opposing parts, then I'll probably just singly mic it and just spread the guitar takes, apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What recording program did you use?
I've been using a software DAW called Studio One, which is a PreSonus operating system. And it works for me. It works. I was using it for film score as well. Look, I mean, they all essentially do the same thing. I guess it's really just what you feel comfortable with, and I know how it works, does what I need it to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the one I use for that.
Yeah. And what about effects? Do you use plugins or analog pedals?
I definitely use a bit of both always. Again, that's probably that combination of old school and new school, which to me is really a perfect world, for us to live in as audio engineers or producers or even just recording artists. So, I've got a few, you can't really see, but I've got a few good mic pre's down here. Some Aurora Audio GTQ2, which are the mic pre's, and I've got a UA6176, which I've had for 15 years, and it's a great mic pre and compressor. They're not effects, of course, that's the more sort of going into the system. The effects wise, I had a Ibanez 405 analog multi-effects unit, which I would use. I've got a Roland Space Echo, the RE201, which I use. I've just recently sold, but on the recording and all previous recordings, I used an outboard spring reverb unit, which is a Demeter. It's a small Californian company that make these spring reverb units. So there's delay, there's reverb, and then there's plugins as well. So there is just there's a blend of both because they all kind of rub up against each other in just the right way, I feel.
Yeah. Steve Schramm was important to your last album, Tides, in giving it direction. Did you have any external influence in that way with this?
I had Nick Didia mix Precious Things. So Nick, Powderfinger's old producer, he sort of put his hands all over that track in a mixing sense. The rest of the album, I just kind of mixed myself. And I don't know if I'll do that again because I think it's important to have someone else's input. I've always had other people involved in all aspects where possible because I think there's greater value in the character of others being in, laying themselves inside songs and mixes or whatever than it all just being you, because inherently we all have habits, we all have safety zones, and we all have walls that we just can't help but live inside, I guess. So I think next time, I was thinking about Steve actually the other day, I might sort of, anyway, I'll wait till next time. I haven't written anything next time yet. But I really kind of took care of this whole project, which, I guess the theme for it, it lives under the banner of Home, this album title called Home. And it's and it's a very much a home job. Like, so I guess the fact that I did so much of it kind of makes sense in the scheme of things, I guess, for this little journey.
Yeah. There's also a fabulous film clip to the track Precious Things. Who did that for you?
Yeah, so it's a guy in Melbourne by the name of Nathan Dalton. I met Nathan a few years ago because I worked on one of his films. So, and then I got him some tickets to a festival, and he said, "Okay, well, I'll owe you a clip." So I called him up and went, "Remember that clip you owe me? Is it okay if I'm going to be in Melbourne next week?" And he said, "Okay, great." And yeah, so he put that together, and I let him run with the whole thing, the whole idea. And so we got hold of this old Mustang, this GT 500, which I'd never driven one of those before. Amazing. It feels like you're kind of sitting on a wild horse, I imagine. Yeah, so he kind of put that together for me, and it's good. I still love the idea of a film clip for a song, to tell a story. If not the song story, then at least a story.
Yeah. You're always involved in a lot of different projects. ARC, the Australian Rock Collective, is one of them. Project you do with Cram, Davey Lane and Mark Wilson. You've had successful shows with Let It Be, the Beatles tribute, Neil Young's Harvest. Do you have any ARC action plan for 2023?
We are going to look at tackling Dark Side of the Moon, I think, at some point next year. And we might actually look. We've been talking for years about the idea of writing and recording some songs together, because it's quite a it is a bit of that magic combination of people where things just work very easily amongst you. So we might sort of write and record a bit next year, and then look at Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon at some point.
Yeah, that's your project.
Yeah, totally. It'd be really fun, actually. Something completely different to Let It Be and Harvest.
Yeah. Did you see Peter Jackson's Beatles film?
Oh, of course.
How did that?
Loved every second of it. And obviously, having been in a band myself, you can relate to a lot of that stuff that just, what would seem fairly boring and average, and sitting around having cups of tea and chatting, and just that's some of the most favorite parts of being in a band are those things, the things when you're off stage and not behind a microphone and whatever. So yeah, I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah. Powderfinger had a documentary on the Internationalist album. Do you think it's important to document things like that along a band's career?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of documenting as much as possible. You can't see it anyway. I've got my camera somewhere. Oh, it's over there. Yeah, you can. There. Anyway, yeah, and I documented a lot of sort of Powderfinger time as well. I've got 1,000 photos that I might do something with at some point. But I think it's really important because, memories can fade and can distort and change and all of that. I think it's great to be able to look back on, some sort of visual legacy of your, journey, I guess, at some point. So, to be honest, Greg, I haven't even watched the Powderfinger Final Sunsets DVD that we made yet. I kind of live that stuff, so I don't really, get everyone around and go, "Hey, let's put this video on, guys. What do you reckon?" I just everyone else can watch it. It's like music, Greg. I think, I often think about this, that you kind of make it for yourself, but the moment it's made, it's really not for you anymore. It's for whoever will take the time to listen to it. So you kind of separate. It's like a child moving out of home. They're still your children, but it's like, you go and do your own thing now. It's great.
So have you thought about how you're going to reproduce these songs live, especially the ones with the strings?
My approach to all of that is that, live is often, it's quite hard for it to be a literal representation of the recording, and I don't ever really try to do that. I think the main thing with a live representation is the key, or I suppose the heart of the song, which will always be the vocal, which will usually be a guitar. And anything I can add to that, I think, is kind of is just bonus material. So with this stuff, I mean, as you can kind of tell, a lot of it can live on acoustic and vocal pretty easy. And I do often travel with a string player, my violinist, Kelly Lane. So, you know, we'll represent the key elements. So that will be guitar, violin, and vocal, I guess, and some harmonies.
Yeah.
But I'd like to play a few of these songs with the band because, you know, a song like Precious Things, you know, I kind of wrote that, you know, it kind of needs a band. It needs the energy and the volume of a drummer and a bass player. So hopefully I'll do some shows early next year.
Yeah. So the album's out on January 15. Is it just coming out digitally? Have you got vinyl in mind?
It's just digital at this point. I mean, I've toyed with the idea of vinyl, and I just don't know if there's really enough interest or there'd be enough people to warrant me pressing the minimum amount that I would have to press for vinyl. So probably just digital at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the plan for 2023?
To do some more shows, to give this record a little bit of support. You know, it's at the end of the recording journey, usually people are like, oh man, I'm buggered, I've had enough, blah, blah. But that's actually when you really kind of need to kick your ass into gear and get behind it and do some shows. So I'm looking forward to doing that. There's a little bit of ARC stuff, of course. What else is coming up? Oh, there might be a bit of a, you know, film TV show kind of thing that I might do, but that's sort of really just done from my home studio. I don't take that on the road. But you know, look, I'm up for anything. So I'll just kind of wait and see which direction the wind blows in, really.
Yeah. The 8-track mini album Home is out on January 15. All the best with it, Darren, and thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, Greg. Take it easy, mate. I'll see you down south soon.